Hello everyone, I'm Ryan from 2 Car Pros, and today we're going to be taking a look at how to service your throttle body housing and plate for a 2008 Dodge Grand Caravan with the 3.3 liter V6. This is an extremely simple repair or service that pretty much anybody can do at any time. It's something that just requires a Torx. You're going to need I think it's an E11 Torx. I say it a little bit later. And there's a link down below in the description to a Torx set. You're going to need to do this. I'm not really sure why they use Torx, but you know what? It's there. We handled it. We're all good to go. Other than that, let's just get into it. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is remove the negative battery terminal cable. We're going to grab our 10mm wrench here and loosen it enough until the terminal comes off. We're going to stash that in such a way that it won't accidentally touch while we're working on the vehicle. The next thing I'm going to do is remove this crankcase pressure tube. It just kind of pulls off. We can swing that out of the way. The next thing we're going to do is unplug the mass airflow sensor off of the intake boot here. And in order to get this mass airflow sensor off, we're going to pull this red safety backward. It's a little hard to get. You can push down on it, I believe, and pull it backward. And then we can push on the safety with our thumb and unplug it. Next thing we're going to do is grab our 8mm socket, wrench, or even a standard screwdriver and loosen these hose clamps. Once those hose clamps are nice and loose, we can wrestle the intake boot off. There we go. So the electrical connector for the throttle itself is right here. It's in a very awkward place because it's well documented that engineers don't like mechanics too much. So we need to push down. I'm going to show you first before my hands get in the way. Push down on this safety here and then pull back on the housing. So I'm going to try to do it with some tools, but you can probably just reach in there and put your thumb on there and pull the housing out. Alright, I got the connector off. I unfortunately wasn't really able to show all of you. I ended up crumbling this side of the safety, but don't worry! Dodge knew that was going to happen, and what they did is absolutely genius. They made it a dual safety connector. So you have to pinch both sides of the plug to remove it. I don't think I've ever seen that on a throttle electrical connector right there. So, very cool. So, like I said, there's two safeties on it, so you're going to need to pinch it like this and work it back and forth. And I actually snapped this one off just by pushing on it. It is very brittle plastic, so be very careful about that. Alright, so we've gotten to the part where we are taking off the throttle housing, and as you can see, these are not normal bolts. These are what's called a Torx, and you're going to need an E11 Torx. Link down below in the description to a great Torx set that you can get for not a lot of money. And you might be asking, well, why would they use Torx? Nobody actually really knows. So there's 4 of them, there's 3 you can see, and one you can't. There's the one you can't's about where my pointer finger is. I'm going to get the hard to see one out first. And there we go, that's what it looks like, and it looks like it's only threaded, even though the whole bolt here is threaded. It looks like only that little bit at the end is actually being used. In fact, you can see it over here. And as you remove this last Torx bolt, make sure you support the housing with your hand, because as soon as you unthread it, it's going to fall off. And I'm pretty sure it's made of plastic, so you wouldn't want it to break. Alright, now that we have the throttle housing over here on the workbench, we can go over how to clean it. So you can see on the back side here, this is the side that's attached to the intake manifold. It's very dirty and gross and has what's called coking on it, which is essentially just impurities in the air building up on the throttle plate and the rest of the throttle tube. You can also use a toothbrush in this situation to help you clean things. That works really well. I don't have an extra toothbrush here, so I'm just going to do my best with a rag. And what I'm going to be using here today is carburetor cleaner spray. I know there's people probably typing with all caps in the comments now that it's not throttle cleaner spray, and we've been using carb spray forever. If you have throttle cleaning spray, I encourage you to use it. I support that decision. Now, if you are like me and you have 16 cases of this lying around, well, carb spray will probably work just fine. But what would I know? I've only been using it for a bunch of years. Okay, so what you want to do is spray it on here and give it a good cleaning. I shouldn't need to tell you how to clean something. That's okay though. So just even that little bit there, you can see how much better it has already gotten, and you want to do both sides. You want to make it as clean as you possibly can. You can open this up manually and get both sides really, really well. You don't want to watch me clean something all day. You want to see how to put it back in. So I'm going to clip to when this is clean. So as you can see, it is much, much cleaner. Look how clean that is. So it is ready to go back in the car. The next thing we're going to do is clean the mating surface between the throttle housing and the intake manifold. So I've sprayed some carburetor spray on a rag here, and I'm just going to clean that surface real well because you don't want any additional air getting in the engine hasn't accounted for. What we're going to do is replace our throttle housing here. Next thing I'm going to do is try to put a bolt in for the blind side. I can't quite see what I'm doing at all. I'm just kind of guessing where the hole is. Let's see if I can get it. There you go. Line it up. Put the socket on like this. Good. And you always want to go in a cross pattern, right? So don't ever go like from here to here. You want to go across. Always across. We're going to tighten these up a little bit, not as tight as we're going to leave them. We're just making sure the housing is sitting flush, which it is, so we can put the other two in now. And again, we're going in a cross pattern, so we're starting up here at the top left if you're looking straight on, and we're going to the bottom right if you're looking straight on. And I don't have a torque spec for you. If I find one, I'll put it on screen, but they weren't on super tight, and it's just holding plastic to, looks like more plastic, with a rubber O-ring in between, so it's not going to be Hulk tight. Alright, now that you've gotten to this step, we need to go ahead and plug the throttle housing back in, like this. And it just plugs straight on until you hear that nice clip. And now we can replace our intake boot. And our intake boot has a little notch actually, just right there. See that? Has a little notch you want to line it up with so the mass airflow sensor is in the correct spot. And then you want to feel around it to make sure it is on all the way, because if there's any gaps, you're going to have problems. And that is all good. And now we can tighten the bolts on the hose clamps. That's a 10mm bolt. There you go, just make sure it doesn't come off. That's perfect. And then we need to plug in our mass airflow sensor. So you get to this step, push your mass airflow sensor until you hear that nice click, and then you're going to push the safety forward. It doesn't really have a click on it or anything, but you're going to make sure that safety's there so this can't just fall off randomly. Once that's done, we can swing our crankcase pressure tube right back over to here and reinstall that. And now we can plug the negative terminal back in on the battery, making sure we touch first, make sure there's no sparks, and there's not, so we are good to seat that. And we can tighten the nut back. You want to make sure your battery terminal is fully seated down. There we go, it's nice and tight, it's not going anywhere, and now we're all done. So that is how to service your throttle housing and throttle plate. This is something that you do need to do every, I would say at least 20,000 miles. This is something you're going to want to do. This is also a service you're going to perform if your car is throwing some sort of throttle plate sensor code. Like I did this on my truck. It was misinterpreting the throttle positioning sensor and the sensor that opens up the throttle, like this car could if the throttle plate got dirty, because coking develops on that plate and it weighs a little bit less, so the car doesn't know any better that the throttle is differing in position from the actual plate going up and down, like, or opening like this, and the throttle inside the cab is doing this, the throttle plate's doing this, and it's kind of lost because the values are changed. I mean, we're talking very, very small amounts, but if the computer throws that code, I'm unsure what it is, I can put it on screen now. One of the codes, it could throw a couple different codes, so this is a cheap and easy way, it's basically free to get rid of a trouble code relating to throttle pedal positioning sensor. So that's pretty cool, and it's also a great thing to maintenance, and it doesn't take very much time. It's something anybody could do. Other than that, I thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy this type of content, make sure you subscribe down below. I upload every Saturday around 10 a.m. to noon Pacific time. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.